The LayoutBuilder class receives the size of its parents. With this information, we can control how the child widget will appear on the screen. For example, we can use the LayoutBuilder to provide different widgets on larger devices. In this lesson, we will use the constraints mapped with property to draw a different view depending on the screen size. We will also look at the orientation builder that builds widget depends on the parent widget's orientation. You can use the orientation property to draw a different view depending on the orientation. In previous lessons, you learned how to use media query to learn about information, including the screen size of your device. But what if you want to know the widget size, not the entire device screen? Of course, if you use media query to get the size of each widget, you can somehow figure it out, but it's not very efficient. We have a solution, the LayoutBuilder widget, that solves all this at once. The LayoutBuilder function is called by layout time, and constraints are provided. In addition, the builder function is called in 3 cases. First, when the first time the widget is laid out. Second, when constraints in the parent widget change. Third, when the parent widget updates another widget. Orientation Builder is a widget to show different UI or values each time you rotate the screen. The code and execution screen will help you understand the Layout Builder immediately. First, declare the device's width as a variable using the media query class you learned in the last lesson. And let's print out the width to the console window. If you look at the console window below, you can see that the width is appropriately printed. We set the body of the scaffold structure to the Orientation Builder widget to determine the current direction. Then it compares the width and height available for the parent widget to determine the current direction and recreate it when the parent widget changes its size. Set the context and orientation of the builder function and specify the return value as grid view count. The cross-axis count property in grid view count specifies the number of columns of the grid to display at each orientation. Next, use ternary operator to set 2 columns to display on the screen during portrait orientation and 3 columns to display on the screen during landscape orientation. Should we increase the proportion of the screen to see for ourselves? Currently, 2 columns of the grid are outputting as portrait orientation. However, if you put the ratio of the screen longer horizontally, it becomes a landscape orientation and the columns are output to 3. It's easier to understand when you look at the working screen, right? For another example, let's change the code to output 4 columns when it's landscape. Modify the value of the ternary operator from 2 to 4 and execute the dismissal. Ta-da! It's now being printed in 4 columns on the screen. Children property determines the number of items in the grid. Set up 6 custom box widgets through the list generate. But when it's landscape orientation, it's uncomfortable because it doesn't fit perfectly. After all, there are 4 columns printed. Developers can't stand this, can we? Let's modify the number of the box widget to 8 and rerun it. Wow, now the 4:2 ratio of grid is perfect. That's cool. When we create the custom box widget we used in Orientation Builder, we used LayoutBuilder. Set LayoutBuilder as the container's child property. And we need to set the builder function like Orientation Builder. Set context and constraints because there is no orientation this time. Because we want to know the widget size through constraints, we can text out the maximum value of constraints as a return value. If we have determined the widget size by constraints, why don't we try something else with this? As the style property of the text widget, we set a ternary operator that outputs the text in red or white if the container size is larger than 160. You'll be able to use it more effectively in various ways than just changing colors. So you can see that when it exceeds 160, it becomes red. That's all for today's lesson. Thank you for watching. See you in the next lesson.